Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of voice of radio. So today, well look, a lot of people have been complaining about Snorlax. Snorlax, Block Snorlax, as it is, the one from Pokemon Go, just went and won a regional championship over in Gdansk in Poland this past weekend. Good card, right? Or is it? Because some people have been calling on it to be banned, and I thought that was a good excuse to make a video I've wanted to make for a while now, the most annoying Pokemon cards ever. Now, quick caveat before we get rolling, there are going to be cards you find really annoying that aren't in this video. I'm giving you my most annoying cards ever, but I'll do you a deal, alright? And the deal is this. I'm happy to make this a series and to do more videos showing off more super annoying cards. So in the comment section right now, before we even carry on with this video, you can do it while you're listening to me. Go and drop in the comment section right now your most annoying Pokemon card ever. This Snorlax? Nah, mate, not even close. It's got the ability Block, which says as long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, your opponent's active Pokemon can't retreat. And then it doesn't really play any energy. The whole point is it's trying to stick you in the active, stick something in the active that isn't a good attacker, and then basically just sit there for the whole game while you run out of cards and lose. It's kind of annoying. And to be fair, it's almost certainly going to go down on prizes because it's not looking to take prizes. So it can really take advantage of the item card Counter Catcher, which of course is gusting, and will gust something into the active, and then it will of course be trapped there with your Snorlax. Or you've got stuff like Erica's Invitation, which will actually take a basic Pokemon from your opponent's hand onto their bench and then right into the active spot. So if your opponent is trying to hold cards in their hand to stop them being put on the bench for fear that they will get pulled active, well, Erica's Invitation will actually go right around that and pull it active anyway, which, as a side note, really annoying. But it totally will do that. And then you've got all kinds of other stuff like Misfortune Sisters, which is a card I love in this deck, because it will actually look at the top 5 cards of your opponent's deck and discard item cards. So any items they might be using to try and get out the active, you're getting rid of as well. And yeah, and that's basically a super duper quick overview of the deck. You're trying to trap something in the active with Block Snorlax, so they sit there, can't do anything, and eventually lose the game. Yes, that is annoying. But there's no way this is getting on this list, and the answer is, the reason is really simple. Play some switching cards. Play a Minior, which incidentally will jump into the active and hits for weakness with a decent attacker against it as well. No, not even close, ladies and gentlemen. This just doesn't make the list. This is too easy for me to counter. My most annoying card ever, probably, I've got a few I'm going to talk about, but the one I have to start with here, it's Gengar. It is Stormfront Gengar. I despise Stormfront Gengar, because essentially what Stormfront Gengar does is go, oh, that's lovely. You put lots of time and effort into building up a Pokemon that can take out this big stage too. How lovely. Yeah, I flipped heads. You're KO'd as well. That is absurd. You see, Gengar had Fainting Spell, and what Fainting Spell did was if Gengar got KO'd by damage from an attack, you flipped a coin. And if heads, the attacking Pokemon was also knocked out. So I'd play this with my lovely Donphan deck, and I'd build up a big Donphan to KO Gengar, and it was a bit of a pain, but I could do it. Generally speaking, the best way to do it with Donphan was to get free energy on there. Then you attach an Expert Belt, and then you're actually hitting 110. And it's also worth noting that there's no resistance here to fighting. Resistance is to colorless, so this will actually work. And you would get a one-hit KO. But Expert Bout meant if you were KO'd, you'd give up 2 prizes. So I get free energy on my Donphan and an Expert Belt. I KO Gengar, and if they flip heads, they get 2 prizes to the one that I got. And I just did all the work. With my Donphan deck, and I didn't always use Expert Bout for obvious reasons, with my Donphan deck, I literally won almost every game against Gengar if they hit 50% on Fainting Spell or less. If they hit more than 50% on Fainting Spell, I lost basically every game. And there was nothing I could do about it. The standard way around it at the time was to use Yuxi, because essentially Yuxi did 20 damage and crucially went back into your deck. And the ruling was that essentially Yuxi went back to the bottom of your deck, and then Fainting Spell had no target, so nothing could be KO'd with Fainting Spell. And some decks could use Yuxi very nicely to get around it, some decks couldn't. And frankly, why should you have to? Why should you have to leave it with 10 or 20 HP remaining, or a bit more if you're bumping up your damage, and then have to use Yuxi to go and get the KO? And the thing is, we've actually had Fainting Spell since then. And some of you were going to be watching this video, you're going to immediately have gone, well, hang on a second, that sounds like wheezing. Or if you're on a bit more obscure and a bit older, that sounds like Chandelure. Well, the difference is, those cards were bad. Like, I like Wheezing from 151. It's clearly got a bit of potential, but it's not a particularly good card, and I know that because 151's been out for a while and no one's playing Wheezing. If Wheezing was a good deck that people were going to be playing, they would be playing it. It's not that good. It's actually called Let's Have a Blast. But it's not good enough because the attack is terrible. 2 energy, 50 to the active, 10 to each of your opponent's bench. The Chandelure was even worse. 3 energy, place 6 damage counters in any way that you like, and that kept it in check. The problem with this Gengar is it was actually good. Like, legitimately good. It had 2 good attacks. Shadow Rune puts 3 damage counter on one of your opponent's Pokemon. 6 if they had a Poké Power. And back then there were a bunch of Pokemon with 60 HP or less and a Poké Power. What used to be an active ability, one you would actually have to use, as opposed to Poké Body, which was passive. And then Poltergeist, you looked at your opponent's hand and did 30 damage for the amount of trainer, supporter, and stadium cards in your opponent's hand. At this stage, I should mention this was largely played with Vileplume, which would block item cards from being played, which meant your opponent couldn't actually get around it, and ha ha ha, ha ha ha. Oh, I despise this Gengar, ladies and gentlemen. It was the most annoying card ever. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe we can go back in time a little bit further to a time before I played, to a card that was so annoying, they literally had to ban it. Slowking. But you see, Slowking, and I've made a video about Slowking before, but I think in this particular video it needs to get at least a mention. Slowking was a mistake, and I mean that very literally. Slowking was an actual mistake. Because it's got the Pokemon power Mind Games. Whenever your opponent plays a trainer card, you may flip a coin. If heads, the card does nothing. Put it on top of your opponent's deck. 2 side notes here. One side note, back then everything was a trainer card. There weren't supporter cards or anything like that. So what we would now call supporters, stadiums, items, tools, all of them, at the time, back in the Neo Genesis era, back in the Gen 2 era, everything was a trainer card. Unless it was a Pokemon or an energy, obviously. Which meant this basically stopped everything. The second caveat, which is also extremely important, it was mistranslated. The Japanese version of this card said, if this Pokemon is active, whenever your opponent plays a trainer card, flip a coin, blah, blah, blah. And that was relevant for 2 reasons. Firstly, Mind Blast sucks. 20 damage, flip a coin. If heads, it does 30 plus confusion. But if tails, it just does the base 20. But also it means it stacks, because it works on the bench. So now I can get 4 Slowking out, and if my opponent wants to play a single trainer card, they have to flip 4 heads in a row. If anyone's wondering about the odds here, that's 1 in 16. So basically, every 16th trainer card they played, they would flip quadruple heads and it would work. And 15 out of 16 trainer cards played, they would flip at least 1 heads out of the 4, and it would fail. And it did get banned, and there were different formats back then. It wasn't quite the menace that we may have thought, and the ban obviously very much helped with that. And I wasn't playing back then, but come on. A card that means you have to flip 4 heads in order to do anything, Oh, yeah, that's annoying. I want another super annoying card. How about Hypnotoxic Laser? Hypnotoxic Laser was a phenomenally annoying card because it did two things. Number one, it was an item card that poisoned. Now, I don't think we're going to get anything like this back anytime soon, because the problem with an item card that poisons is you can then, we had Burbank City Gym at the time, which meant you could do an extra 20 with poison, so you could literally have 30 poison damage on turn 1 going first before your opponent even draws a card. That's a problem. Okay? But also, more annoying, because poison kind of sucked and it led to donks and all of that. Poison wasn't the worst thing about this card. The worst thing about this card was the fact that you flipped a coin and if heads sleep. This card decided, and I played a lot, for the entirety of this. This was in one of my heaviest going to tournament periods because I was unmarried at the time and I had no kids. I was playing an obscene amount of tournaments back then. And I saw so many, and I mean so many games decided by the flip. And both players could play this, right? This is an item card. Anybody could play it. But if you flipped heads on sleep and your opponent flipped tails, because remember, it was only a 1 in 4 chance. You had to flip heads, and then they had to flip tails, because they would get a sleep flip at the beginning of their turn to try and wake up. But if you did flip heads and they did flip tails, they'd miss a turn of attacking. And we saw just dozens and dozens, probably hundreds of games decided because the flips went the wrong way. And it really was as simple as that. If your opponent flipped heads and you flipped tails, you lost. Basically every time. That is just not good. Not good at all. It was a very, very annoying card. But to bring it back to more recent times, a card with which more of you will be familiar, I think, than some of the others on this list, Arceus and Dialga and Palkia GX. In recent times, I hate this card like I hate no other. I despise this card, ladies and gentlemen. This card ruined so many of my decks. Because you had the most broken GX attack of any card ever printed, and I think we can say that with some degree of certainty. Because you see, what this card did as a GX attack was it said that for the rest of the game, all your attacks do 30 more damage, and you take an extra prize for every KO. And, I can show you this with, for instance, Excadrill. From the same set, incidentally. It was also a Cosmic Eclipse card. And I played Excadrill for most of this format. And I just hated ADP. Because Excadrill was a decent card that did decent damage for a single energy. And the thing about Excadrill that was good was that it could trade with multiple prize Pokemon, because they'd be one-hitting me for 1 prize, and I'd be 2-hit or 3-hitting them for 2 or 3 prizes, and I could make that work in my favor. And I could beat almost every deck, except ADP. Because the problem was, if they got the early Altered Creation GX, and I don't have time to go through the whole deck today, but believe me, they usually did, well, then they're one-hitting me for 2 prizes. And they have no weakness that I could really exploit. It was almost impossible to have a good fairy Pokemon to tech into a deck. Well, there was just no good fairy Pokemon around back then. No good tech fairy Pokemon. So I just couldn't win. And sure, I beat ADP occasionally, but I beat them if they had a slow start or if they overbenched weak 2 prize Pokemon. They were my only ways to beat ADP. And I would have a few wins here and there because of it, but that was literally it. And it wasn't just me. Basically any single prize deck generally would come around and go, you know what? I can trade with 2 prizes, I can win. And then ADP was like, no, mate, no, you can't. Oh, it wasn't fun, ladies and gentlemen. It was not fun. But I'm going to finish off with one that was never a serious competitive deck, but it was very annoying. I was one of the very first people in Europe to play with build and battle boxes. Europe got them a little bit later than the US. We started them with Fates Collide, and I was one of the first people to join in. It was fun. Until Dugong ruined my life. My pre-release event. Okay, fine. The lovely Julian Schaff and I were playing this, and he played Dugong. And the thing about Dugong is single energy, 20 damage, heads, paralysis, tail, sleep. So if he flips heads, I don't attack next turn. And if he flips tails, I have a 50% chance of attacking next turn. Now, it only does 20 damage, and it's only got 120 HP. So if I'm going to a regional or a league challenge or something like that, and I've got a nice deck that I've been really working on, yeah, I'm going to destroy this Dugong. Like, every time. Unfortunately, at a pre-release, you don't. Unfortunately, always have something that can deal with this. And you don't have lots of switching cards, etc., because it's a pre-release. It is, to this day, and I have played so many thousands of games of Pokemon, I cannot even keep count. But to this day, that is one of the most annoying games I have ever played. I love Julian. Almost ruined my friendship with him. It was that bad. He was loving it. I was not. Right, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Not an exhaustive list of every annoying card ever, but I think we've got a good list here of some of the most annoying cards ever. Snorlax? Nah, mate. Not even close. But Gengar, Slowking, ADP, and my boy Dugong, oh, I think they absolutely count. Let me know if you want this to become a bit of a series where we look through the most annoying Pokemon cards. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure you put your most annoying card in the comment section. Go nuts! Be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWasi. That's where we talk about Pokemon and a whole bunch of other card games. And please do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts, join a Discord, all kinds of fun things. And of course, get shout outs on the channel like the lovely SWTV, who's been a supporter of ours for a while now and is a very lovely person. So shout out to them for the support and the loveliness. But by far, the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.